Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is an honour to be able to enter into debate on this concurrence report and more broadly the budget in general. And before I forget, I will be splitting my time, I believe, with the member from Caribou, Prince George. Madam Speaker, more than a year late, swimming in red ink, and rife with risky new economic strategies based on the Liberals' reimagined Canada, the Liberals appear to be doubling down on failures. Madam Speaker, it is with great disappointment that we look back at the budget presented a couple of weeks ago and see that in so many ways it is missing the mark on what Canadians need. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm going to try something a little bit different in this speech, and my communications assistant has live streamed my speech as well, which I'm going to try to get some comments on the record from some constituents. Now, some have written me about the budget here in the past, and others I'm expecting will comment on Facebook, but this is the first time I've tried something like this, so we'll go from there. Audrey from my constituency says clearly, instead of begging other countries for vaccines, we need to ensure Canadian manufacturing, like Province Therapeutics, that I would note just announced that they may be moving out of Canada. Without vaccines, we won't be able to get back to work, and a large percentage of small businesses that employ women may no longer exist. Madam Speaker, Deborah said there would be money for programs if the Prime Ministers, Liberals, stopped giving our money away to the Infrastructure Bank, China, and their friends. Fred says, with budget debates starting today, could we possibly get an answer as to why the OAS increase starts at 75 instead of 65 when OAS starts? Is that the Prime Minister's way to save money, since by 75 there's some who have already passed on? Madam Speaker, those are a few of the concerns that I've heard from constituents, and we look at other aspects of the budget. We see a childcare plan, and I agree that a childcare strategy is needed. And in 2006, this was a heavily litigated issue in the election. In fact, it was Conservatives that ran on a universal childcare plan. Now, the Liberals like to take credit for the Canada Childcare Benefit. But really what they did is they took a program introduced and incredibly popular that Conservatives brought forward in 2006 during that election, and changed it a little bit, adjusted it. Instead of paying taxes on it, which was based on income, which was a flat rate for every Canadian, they made it income dependent. And then ran on it as their own and claim it as their own. Well, Madam Speaker, that was an idea brought forward by Canada's Conservatives and was incredibly popular and ensured that the playing field was level. Madam Speaker, here we have proposed in this budget, which I would say it's interesting because it actually goes against what the Prime Minister wrote in the Minister of Finance mandate letter, where he talked about her not being careful to not introduce any more permanent spending. We have an Ottawa knows best approach to childcare. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm a Conservative, so ideologically, I would suggest that so often you see that government is not overly effective at delivering these programs. And you look, for example, at many of the government-run agencies and institutions across this country, and you see simply that it's not the best use of tax dollars, and it's not effective in terms of providing the best services for Canadians. And in many cases, and I've heard from some constituents, and I will admit there's some that are happy about the possibility of more childcare spaces, but are concerned that it will be focused on urban areas that will leave rural Canada behind, as we often see in these big government programs. But further, Madam Speaker, we see that there's many others that have alternative childcare arrangements. One parent chooses to stay home because it's a small business or differing hours, or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or whatever the case is, or an unregistered daycare, which is how many Canadians get their childcare. Those are all not being part of the plan. Instead of it's an Ottawa knows best. We see a $100 billion green infrastructure fund, a slush fund, little accountability. And Madam Speaker, forgive me for not trusting the government with that kind of money when we see 9,000 missing projects with the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And now the government wants another $100 billion. The rent and wage subsidy, my honourable colleague from Niagara articulated very well some of the challenges with, especially, I have 2 communities especially, and other small businesses across my constituency that depend on seasonal tourism. And to see it phased out at a time when hopefully we just start to see a recovery. Very, very problematic in terms of these businesses being able to survive. Madam Speaker, I'll get into a few more of those specifics, but I would just read a few of the comments that I'm getting on Facebook. One by Jesse say, with this budget, feeling very sad for Canada. Another from Shauna talks about the reimagined economy, that risky economic idea. It's troubling that at a time when Canadians need leadership, we are not seeing it. I have another question from Ken that is talking about concern about how the Liberals seem to deflect from the very valid questions that Canadians are asking. Madam Speaker, these are not my comments. These are comments from in this case, followers on Facebook, but Canadians that are asking some very, very serious questions. You know, I find it very, very interesting, you know, this budget, and I've spent a great deal of time, Madam Speaker, over the last number of months talking about the need for democracy and an essential service. And I find it very, very interesting, Madam Speaker, that the Liberals talk often about a Team Canada approach to the COVID response and otherwise. And Madam Speaker, I think that it's interesting to see who is included in Team Canada. Because we saw with Parliament shut down, there was so often a lack of collaboration, and I would just add that the member from Kingston and the Islands, I hope I got a new follower on Facebook, because I'm certainly sure that my constituents will appreciate his comment. But this Team Canada approach seems to leave many behind. And it's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, because at a time when Canadians need leadership, they are left wanting. Whether it's the 750 pages in the budget, which many pundits and political observers have suggested is simply the precursor for an election platform. You know, we see that the Prime Minister let it even slip over the Christmas holidays that, you know, expecting an election. Well, Canadians are not looking for an election. They're looking for leadership out of some incredibly challenging times. We see so clearly, Madam Speaker, that the need for leadership at a time when, as many have rightly suggested, we face significant challenges. Whether that be the small businesses, the families, the women, the young people, and that don't have the opportunities that that should be present. You know, Madam Speaker, I would note another comment that was made, and I see I have 2 minutes remaining. And it's certainly been interesting to try Facebook Live while doing a speech in the House of Commons. I'm not sure that that's been done before, but I look forward to maybe incorporating this again in the future. But I see the question about where's the money coming from, and it's this lack of respect. And Madam Speaker, I have a tremendous amount of research on the swimming in red ink, as I mentioned before. You know, we see a deficit in the last year where there was no budgetary framework that was approximately equivalent to the previous year's entire federal budget. Madam Speaker, that's debt being accrued by our country. And I know that as I read through the budget, the debt repayment plan that's been outlined by the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister has been, well, let's just make sure we refinance at a lower interest rate. Well, Madam Speaker, that's not a debt and a fiscal plan that Canadians can trust won't damage our future. That's money that will have to be paid back. And I know that it is the sort of thinking that could cause significant economic damage to our nation's future, the very future that the Prime Minister and that government talks a lot about, yet they're being left behind by some of these risky strategies. So, Madam Speaker, thank you very much for your indulgence, and I look forward to taking now some questions from other members of the House. And I would just note the member from Kingston and the Islands did comment on my Facebook post, so I'm not sure if that counts as his intervention or not. So thank you very much.
Questions and comments, the Honourable Member for Brampton North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you so much. I just wanted to highlight, the member mentioned infrastructure, slush funds, and money that he thinks is not being well spent. Just today, this morning, there was an announcement in my city of Brampton for electric buses. We're finally getting electric buses out on the road starting tomorrow. And just a couple of weeks before that, we had the largest infrastructure announcement for a third bus facility in my neighboring riding as well, largest of its kind in that riding. This is really going to help set Brampton up to be a city and to meet its requirements. We have a growing immigrant population. A lot of people really need good, clean, safe transportation to get to work. So these investments can be life-changing. So I'm just wondering, from the member, I'd like to know exactly what part of the budget would he like to see cut for Canadians?
Honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I do find it interesting that the members opposite are always so quick to say, well, it's all about what will you cut. Well, it's Conservatives look at things a little bit different. See, the metric for success from the Liberals seems to be the more money you can shovel out the door, that's how successful a program is. Well, Madam Speaker, the reality is very different. Conservatives are focused on ensuring that dollars actually deliver for Canadians, to ensure that every dollar spent is respected and is held accountable and makes the biggest benefit possible. Madam Speaker, that's a fundamental difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals, I would suggest. And when it comes to this infrastructure project, $100 billion would buy a lot of buses. So, Madam Speaker, certainly I hope that that's not a precursor to some of the conversations that we had when the previous Minister of Infrastructure, when bragging about billions and billions spent, was only able to talk about a few buses that were purchased, because Canadians expect a lot more than a few buses for $100 billion.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Kingston and the Abbots.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I did comment on his Facebook page, although he didn't read out my comment, which is fair, but I will say I do admire his desire for the use of technology for the purpose that he did. I thought that was very creative, so kudos for that. But I don't think that he answered the question to the member from Brampton North. The question was, what would you actually take out? Like, it's a fair question to say, you don't support this level of spending. Okay, well, tell us where you would start to remove money from it then.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I did answer the question and do appreciate, I'm sure that engagement that I got on my Facebook page from the member opposite will make waves in the constituency of Battle River Crowfoot, I have no doubt. But again, I bring it back to the very base level of what we're talking about. Dollars spent is not a metric of success. We've spent a tremendous amount during the COVID pandemic, and Conservatives have supported much of that spending because Canadians needed it. Now, would we have done things differently? Absolutely. We would have adjusted programs. In fact, we made a lot of suggestions. The Liberals did take some of our advice. They did not on other fronts. But, Madam Speaker, we have seen at different times throughout this country's history made clear when the finances of our country are not kept in mind, when there's not a strong fiscal framework, and let alone there not being a budgetary framework for an entire year, there being nothing more than a fiscal selfie, and yet there's such extraordinary spending. And now we see increasing evidence that we're set up for an inflation rate that will ensure that could drive more and more Canadians to poverty. Madam Speaker, these are all very, very concerning things. So for the government to simply talk about, the more dollars spent, the better. Well, Madam Speaker, if we're going to spend money, let's make sure that it actually serves Canadians and that every dollar is respected and that there's accountability to ensure that it's actually serving the best interests of the Canadians who pay those taxes, which is why it can be spent in the first place.